I was recently looking at Google Maps and I saw an incredibly straight line of over 2 miles long in the southwest of England. That got me thinking about what it was. I knew it wasn't a Roman road, so I zoomed out and things got even weirder, because this line seemed to line up with the closest points of the Bristol Channel and the English Channel. Was this perhaps part of an old network which connected those two to chop off the need to go round Devon and Cornwall by boat? I'll come back to what it was later, but then that got me thinking, were there any more routes that did just that? Turns out there were, and turns out the story is quite fascinating. Join me on today's adventure entitled How to Chop Off Cornwall and Devon. This is very slow going. On the count. The brambles. So probably the most recent addition to this party is the M5 motorway, opened between 1962 and 1977 to what we broadly see today. Not hugely exciting, so let's step back a bit because we are looking for the quirky, the fascinating and the crazy inventions to cross this route. So let's step back 200 years or so and talk about the railways. So the merchants of Bristol were one of the first to get a rail connection. Very early railway mania saw Brunel connect his Great Western Railway from Bristol to London. Now, the merchants had other ideas because they wanted to connect to Europe. That's a bit further south, wrong direction. That's not easy to do when you're on the north side of Devon and Somerset. So the Bristol and Exeter Railway was conceived. It was finally built in 1844 and it made that connection to the south. And for quite a while it was profitable. But that's not very exciting, that's not very obscure. What about the promises I've already made you about the random routes north-south on this part of the country? Let's really try and chop off Devon and Cornwall in the most random way we can. So let's step back another era, one before the railways and one perhaps a little bit slower than the railways. There's about 3 or 4 different clues within the next kilometre or so as to what this is, and I'll show you them all in increasing spectacularness. Clue number 1 runs through the middle of that farm. Just there is a large masonry structure that runs all the way through the middle. It turns out that is an aqueduct for a canal that once ran through this landscape in the exact direction that we're looking for. Now the route between the Bristol Channel, the Severn Estuary and the south coast was an attractive one to canal builders. Here we have a canal. It was one of those routes, albeit not the most successful. And clue number 2 to its whereabouts today, just up ahead up there, and you can see a lot more than you can of the aqueduct. Clue number 2 lies just through this hedge. Old sign just there on the floor, Chard Canal. I doubt many people see that these days. Head through this hedge just here. Now all of these proposals, these early canal proposals between 1760 and 1825, well, all of them took pretty much the same route down through Chard, which is perhaps the lowest high point here, and on down towards Seaton. Here we are in this open field. Right now I can tell you this spot here, just to the hedgerow just there, and just down to the hedgerow down there, this right here was an incline plane for a canal, the canal that we just referred to. And you'd put your boats in a vessel and it would be pulled up the incline on chains. Very dangerous. And you'll also note that beyond that hedgerow, the hill continues to go even higher. So our third clue, the most dramatic by far, is just through that hedge. Come join me. Can you see it? There's a hole down there, hole in the side of the hill, and let's go and take a look. So 1825, the proposal for a canal across here would start. John Rennie and Thomas Telford surveyed the route, and they put a cost of 1.25 million on this canal. So Chard was to get a canal, but it was going to have to wait a little bit at that cost. Now bizarrely it would do that, but it would have to wait until 1842. And here we are right in front of me now, the Crimson Hill Tunnel on the Chard Canal, 1800 yards long, just over a mile long. We don't look too deep on the water. There's a room for stop planks at the start. Yeah, not your classic canal construction of a tunnel face of a portal, but perhaps that was because this is so late. This canal would reach Chard eventually by this series of tunnels and incline planes, but by that time we're too late in canal building for it to really make an impact on transport in this area. And it did link up with a couple of others to the north, but really this story of this canal was never going to be a successful one. Let's head for the more quirky, just to the west of here, down past Taunton and Wellington, for some really bizarre stories. Now, James Green is a man of a million ideas, and as surveyor of the Grand Western Canal, well, that was set to join essentially the north coast to the south coast. That's a big tick for what we're trying to do in this video. Now there's a plateau, you could say, between the route they chose, Bristol and Taunton on the north side. The plateau is the easy part because you don't need to do anything with the water. Either side of that though, you do need to get down to Exeter on the south and the Bristol Channel, where you need to lose that gradient. So James Green came up with what I'm staring at right now, which has been very well preserved. He came up with a boat lift based on the Anderson principle. Look at that. So here it is in all its glory. It's very beautiful. This is one of, I think, 6 lifts that James Green came up with to negate the need for locks and loss of water. There'd be a huge mechanism in front of there which would have massive great wheels on with chains going over the top, and that would lower essentially caissons full of water, and the boats would be able to go up and down and balance itself out. Didn't quite work out as expected. The principle was indeed a boat lift that you'd simply enter into at the top, door closed, caisson lowered, opposing door open at the bottom, and you'd flow out. Quite simple principle. However, there's a lot more engineering dynamics involved, and that's where James Green got things a little wrong. Now, there were 7 lifts constructed in total between 1834 and 1836. And once these problems were out of the way, with a few modifications such as locks on the front of them, well, they did work satisfactorily for 30 years. Unfortunately, the need for locks on the front kind of defeated the object. So the 9-head lift there remains reasonably well preserved. A lot of masonry still left there, and as the sign says, well, it's been out of use for 150 years, and it's a significant importance, which it is, because it's the only surviving lift left of the 7 that were built. But that's not true. Let me take you somewhere else and I'll show you a little secret. So, I promised you something spectacular. I promised you something that nobody really knows about. Welcome to Alliford, just a few miles to the north towards Taunton on the Grand Western Canal. Grand Western Canal is kind of there. You can't really see it just a bit of a ditch in the hedgerow. Now it's going to take a little bit of finding, but half a mile or so in this direction is something quite special. Between here and quarter of a mile, maybe less in that direction, we're looking for another boat lift. As I say, no one knows it's here. Maybe they do, but they don't know the exact location. I don't know what remains of it. Now if I turn the camera around, you'll note that there is an embankment. So somewhere between that embankment there and here is a lift. Right. Okay, so I've missed it because there's the embankment. So between there and there is a boat lift. That's just insane to think. Somewhere in there is a 200-year-old boat lift, or 190-year-old boat lift built by James Green. That's quite mad. Let's go and see if we can dig into those brambles. That's impossible. Oh my god. This is just insane. Right, we're here. Here we are, on top of Alaford boat lift. Wow. Well, most of the masonry's been robbed out here, but you've seen a very similar style to what you'd have seen at Ninehead back there. You've got the entrances here and just over there, and ahead of us, the huge gap that would have been full of masonry, and you'd have had the big wheels ahead of you there, which would have pulled or hoisted up each of the caissons, which would have held the boats. Well, I think these, combined with the inclines, because this canal did have inclines, I think the combination of those and those inclines really meant that the canal didn't outlast the railway just to my west. Now there is another route, one of more medieval origins, but it's much further to the west, halfway across Devon, so it doesn't really fit our theory of chopping off Devon and Cornwall, the ancient mariners' route across Dartmoor. Perhaps one day we'll look at that in more detail as a separate video. So can we go back in time to a different era, and perhaps this was actively crossed by a civilization? Perhaps if we go and look at the Roman period, or maybe they needed a shortcut around Devon and Cornwall across the land here. So even before the successful invasion of Britain, the Romans knew the lay of the land here. They knew what they wanted, where to get it and how to get it. They wanted resources, and they got them. They made a beeline through Winchester, Salisbury and up to the Mendips to get lead on the now lead road, what was called the lead road. That doesn't really fit the criteria of this video, chopping off Devon and Cornwall. Although it does make an interesting line, it's not the line we're looking for, and it's not really the purpose we're looking for either. So did the Romans have anything else up their sleeve to connect their route and that route? Well, it turns out they did, and it's really quite a fascinating story. And I found an Iron Age hill fort. I assume it's an Iron Age hill fort, and I wanted to get up and have a look at it, but I'm seemingly walking on a path that goes around it, doing one big circle. So this hill fort is Dundon Hill Fort. I was hoping it would illustrate quite well how the Romans would have traversed this area of land, because to the south there's a fairly clear route to Ilchester, Roman town, and then on from there you would be able to pick up the Fosse Way, head on down to the coast that way, or perhaps even head towards Dorchester. But to the north, well, we've still got 10 or 15 miles to go. It's relatively flat, and worse still, it's only about 1 to 2 meters above sea level. At last we've reached the top of Dundon Hill Fort, and it's huge. It's quite some scale. I think it's about half a kilometre north to south, and done no research on this, so I can't give you any indication of what happened here, whether it was just a marketplace or actually there was people that lived up here. Now the Romans, well, they had a plan to get that last 10 miles, 10-15 miles up to the channel in that direction. Now perhaps like ancestors and ancient trackways before them, they used a ridge. There was a ridge that headed northwest from here across to the River Parrett that then connected to the Bristol Channel. Now that becomes even more apparent if I just raise the sea level just a few metres. All of a sudden that route becomes very clear. Well done the Romans, tick. You've given us something for this video. But surely we can't head back even further than the Romans, can we? So I stopped at a place called Avalon Marshes, as you'll have seen, just there in the background, looking for something much older than Roman. In fact, it's older than the difference between us now and the Romans back to the thing I'm trying to find, if that makes sense. Wow. So I've been trying to find this now for about half an hour. Eventually just found the smallest of signs back there, and I've been wanting to come here for years. You're going to give me a little bit of poetic license here with regards to the video and it cutting Devon and Cornwall off as a route, because we're stepping back now into the Neolithic era and we're looking for the Sweet Track, as you may have seen by that sign. And I'm in this absolutely beautiful nature reserve. I just walked through this, just stunning, and I think if we just head a few hundred yards this way we'll find something quite incredible. Now it's incredibly marshy even on this track under my feet right now. That tells you what we're looking for. Now back in I think the 1970s, a man named Ray Sweet found what he believed to be a very old trackway, sort of rudimentary planks on top of each other with stakes going in sideways underneath at an angle to support those planks. Now, using dendrochronography, it was found that those planks and the route was built in around 3807 BC. I say around, that's quite specific. A routeway here across these marshes, dangerous marshes, nearly 6,000 years old. That's incomprehensible in terms of timescales in my head. So this route I've been walking now for the last 20 minutes or so takes the exact course or thereabouts of the Sweet Track, and it was said to connect West Hay and Whitewick. So around about a mile and a half long. It was used for around 10 years and then abandoned. I think there's quite a lot of those types of routes here across the marshes. So what was the straight line at the beginning of this video that sparked the whole thing? Well, it turns out it was a road established at the time of the Enclosures Acts, specifically in this case the early 1800s, which gave local farmers access to newly created fields. It turns out it wasn't quite as exciting as we first envisaged. I was explaining to one of my kids early in the week about the concept of a tree falling over in the woods and whether or not it made a sound. Now that in turn got me thinking about this, the nature of me telling you these stories, because in truth anyone could do this and tell the tales with a little research. I guess you could waffle away like me for ages. I'm no academic, so in truth I guess I am the tree falling over in the woods, and you lot, well, you're all the eardrum. Without you there is no sound, just a desolate tree shouting away to itself in the woods. And I guess that's me. I guess that's what I have the privilege to be able to tell you these stories and maybe help those stories get heard by everybody around them and maybe turn it into something tangible and accessible. So for that alone, well, I'm appreciative. Thank you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.